Hello, everyone, to another episode of Everything Cyber. This is the 11th version of our deep dive conversations, and this one is going to be a must listen one because it's about a topic you hear about everywhere in cybersecurity. Whether it's in conferences, whether you're talking with someone, or you're listening to a blog or a podcast, people will keep on saying about communication and collaboration. Whether you're an engineer or an IC or a manager or whatever level of cybersecurity you are, chances are that we do need to communicate heavily with our stakeholders. It is with other software engineers, with program managers, to the board, and much more. And throughout all this, it's definitely not an easy task to do. People always ask why we should do it. They might push you back on, no, we don't have the right resources and time to do it, and many other things that might not make you look eye to eye. These challenges are not faced by you alone, and it's very prevalent in the industry. That being said, there are lots of ways to overcome all these as well. And that's what today's episode is going to be about. Today, we have a very special guest, Sebide, who has tons of experience in the security industry and has been around all kinds of security roles where he had to communicate with various different stakeholders. We'll have a window to all his experiences and opportunities to interact with others and see what we can learn from them. So we'll be talking about things like what exactly makes communication and collaboration hard between security and other teams. What are some of the strategies we can take to overcome this challenge? What are the typical reasons people push back on doing security requirements like fixing a bug or onboarding a certain tool and various things? So this episode was very practical and insightful, and you can take lots of nuggets of information regardless of your role or your seniority level. So without further ado, let's get started. Hello. Welcome,
Hey guys.
everyone.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you.
It's me too.
Hello, Sebide. Welcome to Everything Cyber. We are very excited to have you on board with us today. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Skype. I'm happy to be here in Australia. I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's been a long time coming, so happy to talk.
Awesome. So we're going to begin off with definitely with introductions and Sebide. I'm not going to do justice by trying to summarize the very experienced career you have so far, and I'll actually give it to you for introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what you're passionate about and what you've been up to so far.
Thanks, Skype, for the kind words. So my name is Sentongo. Some people call me Samuel. I've been in the security industry in particular for about 10 years. Started working with Trust. So some of you are familiar with that organization. It was an organization that came out of, I believe, Melbourne and Sydney, and I did my internship with them. Moving on from them, I went to work with VA Systems that was based out of Malaysia. That's where I did my studies, and then moved to Sydney 2015. And that's where I learned my chops as a pen tester. I've been a pen tester for about 4 years from then. And this is going through the whole gamut, you name it. It's web application, mobile applications is a passion of mine and something I've been doing, and also infrastructure. Along in that journey, during the 4 years of pen testing, I also dabbled in sales. At one point, I was as head of sales for New South Wales region, and I was supporting a team here as well. So I decided to expand my role and say, well, I am more how can I be more client facing and get over my fear of public speaking? And the way to do that is make cold calls and become a salesperson in cybersecurity. So that was an interesting experience, I might say. It was a long 9 months, and I also I made the sales during COVID as well, so that was fun and also terrifying at the same time. But there are lessons from that. I'm a much better person from that. Yes, moving forward from there after security testing and pen testing, I looked at what I was looking for and in my next steps, and that's how I ended up in the application security field. I started up with a startup, being that first app engineer, supporting about 70 engineers. This is doing things from security awareness, building controls, internal penetration testing, and also just being the security point of contact for the C-suite and all the executives in the organization. Moving on from there, then I got wind of Atlassian and the great work they're doing. I've seen a couple of talks that they're doing about some of their internal tooling and also the security team. And an opportunity came to work within their ecosystem. And this has brought me to this journey here. So this has brought me to this journey of how do you support, how do I scale myself as a security engineer and support about, let's say, 100 engineers in one day? How can I scale myself and be able to service at the same time not get burnt out? And this has led me to this topic of marriage counseling between security and engineering. And it's something I really enjoy talking about. And I'd like to share my views and discussions with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you for that really extensive introduction, Sebide. And
Yes,
we can
well,
see that you have a very illustrious journey so far. Like, some people, they imagine being a pen tester, they imagine being an AppSec, they imagine in sales engineering and all that, but you have done it all literally. So
Yeah.
and I think if we needed someone to come and talk about the whole communication gap between security and all its stakeholders, you're definitely the best person about it.
Sabina, you did a brief intro about the topic at the end of your introduction. Would you like to
yes.
go a bit further and talk about some points that you'd like to bring some light to within the topic?
Yes, thank you. So this topic, it didn't come up in a vacuum. This is something that I read. Read and watched a presentation from a very illustrious lady named Leslie Carhart. She's in the ICA space, and I believe she ran PancakeCon. So she said confessions of an IT marriage counselor. So she was giving her viewpoint of, if I come in and I'm a security tester, a security consultant, and I want to get things done in an organization, and I have about 5 to 10 days to get things done. How can I get things done and also still do it with empathy and not just have the attitude of do everything use a hammer or just use everything to just break through? So this comes through ideas of saying that identifying that, yes, and this was in 2019, I would say, and me identifying that there are gaps between the communication between security and also when it comes to engineering teams. And examples I could give was that everything security was looked at as, oh, these are the risk people, these are the people who say no, these are the people who say blockers. Now, granted, I would say that this attitude is changing and security is being seen more as an enabler, but I want us to be seen more than enablers, but I want us to even be seen as a source of innovation and even a source for business innovation as well. So this is where my priority is, and this is where my inspiration came from.
Mm. Yeah, I think most people in security can really relate to this because at certain points security is nothing independent. It coexists with so many other sectors of the organization, of the whole IT layer. So you would need to sooner or later talk with either the engineers, the program managers, the executives even, to
Yeah,
pretty much negotiate or persuade, influence, whatever the term you use, to
yes,
have some sort of communication. And I think that's definitely one of, some people really enjoy it, some people really fear it, but
yeah,
whether you like it or not like it, it's still something you need to do, and it can be a challenge to get things done. And I think that's the essence of our the discussion, which it will be like,
yeah, definitely.
what kind of problems you can face, this whole communication exercise, and let's say how to get over that, how to make
Yeah,
communication smoother, and some will share some strategies, tips and tools and all that things. So pretty
yeah,
excited.
yeah, definitely, Kai fan story. If you think about like from a general like development life cycle, or even just for an engineer or CEO, the first time they hear about security is not from a place of something they should do. It's either someone got breached, or they have a phishing email, or there's a regulation that has come in and said
Mhm.
you have to have all this security, whether it's essential aid or if you work within finance and they say, hey, APRA comes on with security. So it necessarily doesn't come from a place of love of, oh, we really think we should be security. Most of the time, I would say it's more like either they have to do it out of compliance, or if they're doing business with a bigger company, they say, hey, you are a third party to us and we want you to do all these security checks. So once it comes in with this, I would call it adversarial mindset or something they have to do, it becomes security typically is looked at as a checkbox. And then when you come in, they'll be like, okay, fine, we just want to get this over done with and move on to the next thing that we have to do, which is rolling out features or getting this new business. Now, what I'm looking at is if we change the conversation and say, okay, I know you're seeing it this way, but how can we use security as an enabler of business? How can I allow you to take risks and take business risks that will get you more revenue or more money, but still feel safe within the things you're doing?
Mhm.
And some of the things that I've learned has also come actually from my time doing sales. And doing sales, you learn to speak about they ask you things like what does the business value? What are the incentives and goals for the business? And also what is the language that's common used in the business? And this is
Mhm.
something I'm sure you people have come across. Like we can say that this is a high risk, this is a low risk, but then someone will say, well, what risk framework are you using? Because according to my risk framework, this is a low risk. Well, according to my risk framework, it's a high risk. So it's all those different jargons and things you have to figure out in order to bring, I think, we could have a future whereby security is not only just seen as we're adding security features, but you're also just helping the businesses grow and grow. And I'm sure the companies that are using this as an enabler and at last time is trying to go in that direction. And it's
Mhm.
something I'm really excited to speak about.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Exciting.
I think you
Yep.
brought a very key point, that is the collaboration between security and software teams. But I guess it's in general, I would put as security and stakeholders who are developing a
Yeah.
product or tool or some sort of enabling process within the business itself. So what kind of problems do you see that the absence of collaboration creates? So if you do not collaborate with these teams and you're just like, hey, you do your thing first, I come in later and I'll do the security after everything is done.
Yeah.
So what happens when you're not collaborating during the whole development stage? Like, what is the biggest issue you
Ah,
see? Yeah.
well, so I can give you a classic example. So yeah, everything cyber wants to collaborate with Microsoft, and you have this application you're selling to them. So they'll say, "All right, this is amazing. Really like your mobile app, but first we want you to go through some testing." So you go and they'll maybe recommend third-party vendor to test your product, and then they'll come back with these findings. Now, when you come back with these findings, there'll be a rating from, let's say, critical to low, and and depending on the quality of the testers or what they've used, whether they've used scanners or something, you might have hundreds of findings or tens of findings or just even little findings, depending on what they've done. Now, when you present this pen test report or these findings to an engineering lead or an engineer, they look at all these findings and they're like, oh my God, what do I do? How do I even prioritize this? Because they also have their own roadmap, you have to remember. They're building out features, they also have their own tech debt they're dealing with. So then it's a case of like, the first thing they always come to me and ask is like, well, Sam, we have all these things we want to do and we don't know how to prioritize these bugs. Are you saying we should stop all the work we're doing and focus on fixing these bugs? Or should we just fix some of them and continue on? And this is where the collaboration piece comes in. Because if you have the collaboration piece and you come and have a conversation with them and say, hey, there's this report coming down the line, and I want to explain to you what this means and how this will impact your product roadmap. It will allow them to give them the room to think and also prioritize on their own. Because I also want to move to a space whereby they have their own prioritization framework and they don't always have to lean on me in order to prioritize the bugs. But in the initial stages, that's what they'll need. And
Mm.
yeah, is that clear for you? I don't know if
Yeah,
I've answered
yeah,
the question.
that was really clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you made a good point that the teams have their own roadmaps, and often if we give security that these are the things you need to do, that list can certainly be quite long. It's rather working with the dev teams to work on things like, okay, these two vulnerabilities, we need to get that done as soon as possible when you can in your roadmap. These three, they can be done slightly later, but this is the time frame we're dealing with. And if you have this amount of work, what can we do about it? Do we accept the risk, or do we say that, okay, these ones are we going to do or do not do? And then these ones we can say that, okay, based on your other work and other priorities, we can just push them back for now because they're not as much as of a threat. And often explaining the business impact to them, right? That.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and sometimes you find even vulnerabilities or bugs that are things that could be done away with. Like you could find that, oh, we did a scan of this of this infrastructure and has all these bugs. And then you're like, wait a minute, do we still actually use this build deployment? No, we actually don't use it. Then they just shut it down and there you go. And then
Mhm.
maybe a case of like renovators come up with all these things they have to upgrade. And then they're like, well, I mean, there's always we always say we'd move to the next version of Node or move to the next version of .NET. And this is all something you could do. It could maybe be a conversation of why they already have those controls in place, but that is not seen from the penetration
Mhm.
tester's background. So to be a case of like, yes, we know that there's this and this here, but we have this control here which minimizes the impact and that lowers the risk rating.
Mhm.
So that's where the conversation piece comes in. And we also have to give a case of leaving the engineering teams that autonomy and power to make those decisions so that they don't feel helpless every time vulnerabilities come or there's a bug and they're like, oh my God, we don't know what to do. Let's wait for Kaif to come and tell us what to do. But giving them that power and autonomy to make decisions
Yeah.
their own
Make
is really
decisions. Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fairly good point. Okay, so we have understood the premises. Now, if we are talking from a security professional's perspective on how best they can tackle these communication challenges, what would be some broad strategies or techniques you have employed so far in your career that you would like to share with others?
Yeah. So I can give broad tips and broad strategies, and I'll just use things I've done. So there's a book I've read, Never Split the Difference. It's by Chris Voss. It's a book on negotiation. So
Mhm.
and if you think about life, a lot of times they're negotiating for time, negotiating for money, negotiating for space, or negotiating for everything. So applying these tips of having like sort of the different terms they use like non-violent communication. So you're treating someone as and having empathy and treating them as a partner in something you're trying to achieve and not the
Mhm.
adversary. So it could even be simple tricks of like I don't want to use the word tricks, but an example, like if I come to you and say, I say, like, let's say I wake up Monday morning and you haven't finished, like this bug fix I told you to fix, like
Mhm.
on Friday. So I'm like, hey Kai, why didn't you finish this and this? I really need an answer now. Now that
Mhm.
comes off as very adversarial because I'm like asking you. But then if I come there and say, hey Kai, oh, I noticed this and this. How come you didn't finish this? It's a much softer tone, but I'm still delivering the same question. I'm still asking for an explanation, but it's not coming off as very adversarial and asking that I need this answer now. Now, those are some of the things you could do, and also apply empathy as well. So, um, when you apply empathy and you think not only from your perspective and learn to understand that these engineers as well are also engineers and also human, you get much farther. One other thing I was speaking to you earlier about as Spot Speak is yes, you work with engineers, but you also work with product managers and also you have program managers. If you learn to speak their language and figure out what motivates them, so whether that's features, whether that's roadmaps, if you understand the tools they're using in order to get things done, that would be much easier. So
Mhm.
I try and not introduce a new process, but figure out the processes they're doing and do that. So if you allow me just expand a bit slowly. So what I could do for as an example is if I know the engineering team has every Monday they have a sprint and a retro, and sprint planning and a retro every Monday, and that's how they plan out their work. I could just join that conversation and say, hey, okay, fine. This is your sprint planning conversation. I want you guys to help me fix this stuff. And that will be added into the sprint planning as well. And that will help them plan for the week. So instead of having a separate meeting to figure out when they can fix like those bugs and stuff, you can just join that sprint planning conversation and piggyback your conversations there.
Mhm. Yeah. So the things you, so some of the strategies you shared was firstly of it, the tone of delivery rather than it's us versus them, it's us versus the problem, and
Exactly, yeah.
having that mindset that it's the business that is being impacted, and it's not that I want you to just get this done for the sake of it. Here's the
Right.
business risks that actually spew from it. Making them understand
Yeah,
often helps, and that empathy and trust, the other aspects you mentioned.
that's right.
Yeah. How about risk management frameworks? Is that can be broadly utilized? Like if you have different frameworks and you tailor those frameworks towards that. Okay, we have this framework, and this is actually this is the risk that the
Yeah,
framework is giving us.
yeah, definitely. So the way I think of risk management framework is in terms of there's a concept of system thinking. So when you think of organizations, whichever size, whether it's 100, 10,000, 20,000, they have different levers to get things done. And some levers are like, we have this big grand strategy and everything points to the strategy, and that's how we get things done. Other times it's like certain individuals are the ones, if you want to get things done in an organization, go and speak to this individual and the director want to get things done. Now, risk management frameworks can also be another lever. Everyone loves risk. Everyone likes thinking in terms of risk. And it's a common language that could apply not only to security, but procurement and something the boards understand, something executives understand. Is that when you go and speak to a CEO and say this is a high risk, they'll understand what a high risk is within a certain threshold for the organization. So what I mean by risk management frameworks is if you understand getting spending the time to understand how risk is measured and how risk is governed within your organization will help you get things done better. It can be used as a lever. It's not the only lever you could use, but can be used as a lever. So it could give an example. You might say that, okay, I have determined that the network we are running, the architecture we have, is not necessarily the best architecture we have if we want to move to the next level. And what does the next level mean? The next level might be that the business wants to work with some more government suppliers, and the government suppliers say that if you know how to work with us, you have to fit within this risk management framework. So you can use that risk management framework as a lever to get things done, and you can say, hey, I know that you're interested in this business and you want to move to the next level. If you want to attract this type of business, then we have to fit with it. I won't call it fit, but work within this risk management framework to get this done. Some of the things that I'm talking about is like ISO 27001. It could be depending if it's PCI DSS. So it's once you start speaking in terms of that risk framework, you could even use that different, if you have a risk and compliance team, you can actually use them to get, not use them, but then use them as a tool to actually get the thing done that you're trying to do. And if you think about that as a security engineer, you have so many things you're trying to do at the same time. And if you want to scale, then using a risk management framework can allow you to scale because you can just say, okay, let's follow this framework or do these things within these criteria, and then people will follow that. So, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I have one question. Have you ever had a situation where you're dealing with conflicting risk management frameworks, where like as a security team, you're using a particular risk management framework that might be based off like ISO 27001, and then the development team or the business team, they have a completely different risk management framework, and for them, high in security might mean completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Actually, that happens a lot. I won't lie. So it will be a situation where you come and say, we have identified these are the top 10 risks within the organization. And when you can speak to the product manager and say, okay, let's work with this, they're like, well, what's the risk management framework here? So then when you go and speak to, actually what they do when they see risk, they go and speak to the risk compliance team. And risk compliance team and say, wait a minute, we didn't come up with these risks. So what they start comparing is that this like, well, is this actual risk and what is it impacting? Now, what we have found in that case is the success I've had, and I've had success and failures with this. So I've had cases where I've brought people into a room. So I've got the risk person who comes and speaks. Then I've also got the product manager and get into a room and have a conversation and say, okay, this is what we think is the priority to fix, and what are your thoughts on the risk and compliance framework? Now, that a couple of ways it could go. A risk and compliance team could lean on the security team to for advice and say, okay, what is in your interest? What do you think is actual risk, and give us a direction? Or the risk and compliance team could say, no, we have our own definition of risk, and this is where it wants to go. I would say most of the times the risk and compliance team acknowledges that they may not have a necessary security information, or sorry, product security expertise, and they lean on you as security. But if they don't, they could go the other way. So that is to say, like, yeah, it does happen. But just having that conversation, in case you come into that, it might be worth involving the risk and compliance team earlier in the conversation to get things done. The other ways you could do this, like I've found the ideas around like building up, like if you have different if you have different sources of information, you can build like a risk dashboard that you can regularly share with the risk and compliance team, so that it just keeps them in the loop and they don't get surprised when these risks just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good idea for sure.
Yeah, and something that could if you have the information, depending on your source of data, and you can pull information, you can make it almost like real time or run it once a week. And that's
Mhm.
something they could always look at the table. So they don't have to come and ask you, Storia, or what are the top 10 risks? There's just like an app or like a document that already has that information for them.
Yep,
Mm.
gives you more time to scale or work on other parts. So
I
thanks,
go.
Abhiday. Yeah, moving to the next part. Coming to some of the strategies that you mentioned earlier, what are some of the common obstacles and roadblocks that you face when you want to implement security features or fix vulnerabilities?
Thanks for that question, Surya. So, a couple of the obstacles I've faced is, and these come in multiple facets, because, as you know, we are human beings, and sometimes we have our own biases, and also sometimes we have been bad before. So, the easiest one I can give as an example is that this won't be the first time that maybe interacted with security before or security engineering team before, and they feel that the work they did maybe that the process wasn't as smooth or the work wasn't as engaging as they felt. So with that past knowledge of oh, this is another vulnerability I have to fix, they may not be as engaged, and that would be the first obstacle you
Mm.
face. The teams may not be engaged, or they were just bad before and they're tired of fixing vulnerabilities. Now, how you may do that is one of the ways you could first is just coming the empathy and having that open discussion and saying, look, I understand that this is not your favorite cup of tea, or maybe what you don't like doing, but if we have a common goal, how can we get where you want to go and also get where I want to be? And once you take that away, because you take it away from saying that it's not me, I'm not the person who's responsible for how you feel, but it's more a state of the organization, the culture, and moves away from like trying to set it from an us versus them, and of how can we get things done together. Other examples I think of obstacles is just general culture. So if there's a culture of if the security culture and awareness is not strong within the organization, or there's no appreciation for the impacts of security, then that could be a challenge as well. So that's where you might have to lean on executive support or have support to communicate that more. Some of the things I've done in the past are like hosting hackathons, so making security more engaging. So like saying, okay, fine, for just one day, we are going to have developers build security features, or we're even going to have them do pen tests on their own code or do code reviews. And you find that you identify some people who actually like doing the security aspects of that work, and those could be people you could lean on in the future to be like security champions or just be supporters of the work you do. Other challenges I've faced as well is I'm trying to think. Sorry, I blanked out there.
That's
Uh,
fine. I think some of the common ones I've seen is also just flat out time constraints or competing priorities, because
yes.
it's not security and the world revolves around security, right? So
Oh, yeah,
there
that's
as
the
in the world of the developers, there's many other stakeholders,
Mhm.
and they are always trying to compete for the developers' attention and time and all those things. So maybe security has put down an ask, and site reliability, for example, has made an ask that, hey, your
yeah,
service
yeah,
needs to have this amount of reliability. And Sabine, any further thoughts on that?
yeah, definitely. And I'd like to even expand on that further. So sometimes, like when we give recommendations to fix or something, and say, okay, like let's have this feature or have this validation or have this thing. If sometimes you don't think, even I would even say a lot of times, you don't think about the impact that would have on performance, the impact that would have on reliability, and the impact that would have and the time it takes to deliver that fix. So you might introduce a new thing that does like checks, let's say checks every second, but then it's like, well, if I'm a SaaS application and I need to have like microseconds response, and you're introducing a 1 second delay because of a security feature, does this
Mhm.
actually make sense for me as a business? So there's also that. So then you go into this whole maelstrom of like architecture decisions, and maybe this fix that we thought was just one fix is actually a whole architecture redesign, that could now take like 2 to 3 quarters. And then now you have to have that discussion with management to say, should we own that risk and say that we're not going to fix this for now? Or are we going to dedicate a team for like 1 to 2 quarters to actually work on this?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things. I'm sure you guys have come across that. So definitely.
Yeah. This is a very common challenge. That's always there, because if the security can introduce friction in the developer's flow and the application itself.
Yeah.
So sometimes there will be just enough pushback from the dev team that I understand the risk is very high, but other business priorities are just not allowing us to accept that, uh, to work on that risk, to alleviate it in the solution you have given. In those scenarios, we have taken the approach of, instead of fixing the problem, building guardrails across the problem, and trying to make other paths secure, so that that risk we have, that is mitigated in some way. And I'll actually give a very practical example that is not from my work, but from a very popular bank we have in Westpac, in Australia, Westpac Bank. So if you, for those who have banked with Westpac, they would know that even to this day, Westpac Bank only supports passwords to up to 6 digits, and they can't have any alphanumerical and other things as well. It's just plain numbers and letters, and that is easily brute forceable. That is easily can be exploited. So, and when I was speaking with engineers from Westpac, and their assurance was, look, we understand, and because of some tech debt, it's something we just cannot address directly. But we have done our best to make sure our platform is secure um, around that condition. That, okay, we will have easily guessable passwords, but what more we can do to make sure that someone malicious cannot get access to your bank account, or even if they get access to a bank account, they can easily do transactions or get away with it. So those kind of things, I always think needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of raise great points around. Yeah, like look, if you're impacting developer productivity and workflows, no one likes a fan of that. So examples are like if you have the static tools and analyzers, and it's just giving them all these things to fix, and it's not passing the test, then it should be like, what am I doing? Why should I onboard my repo onto the static code analyzer if I'm going to spend my next 3 days trying to figure out whether this actually impacts me or not. So, it's definitely like but having said that, I've seen in organizations this is improving. Like security is becoming more embedded and working closer with engineers, and they're not being seen as adversaries. So definitely, like we're getting closer and closer, and speaking the same language as well, and also being seen as enablers of business. And and like you said, like the vulnerabilities may be there, but if you have mitigations, workarounds, whether it could be okay, fine. We know we know that there's this limitation in the password, but we have MFA as well. We have logging as well. So we have all these detections in place. It kind of helps limit the impact or what the impact could be. So that's really helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Sebide. Surya, do you have more to add? Otherwise, we'll pull the curtain on this one.
No, I think that's about it.
All good. Cool. Thank you so much, especially to Sebide for jumping on to us on the call and sharing all of your knowledge and experience.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks once again to you and Kai and Surya. Yeah, I've actually caught up with some of the things you are doing. Yeah, and also I know you guys are speaking this year around container security and resilient security building resilient containers. So yeah, like really proud of the work you guys are doing, and continue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and super thanks to your audience for listening to us so far. I hope you got lots out of that. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.